It is approximately 200,000 years ago, somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and the sun is going down. You are a member of a small band of early Homo sapiens, healthy, capable, cognitively sophisticated by any reasonable measure. You have had a productive day, there was food, the group is intact, no one was seriously injured. By the standards of your era, things are going reasonably well, and now you need to sleep. This should be a simple biological requirement. Humans need approximately 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. This is not optional, not negotiable, not something evolution made flexible. Sleep deprivation kills. The neural maintenance, memory consolidation, immune function, and metabolic regulation that sleep performs cannot be postponed indefinitely without consequences that rapidly become fatal. You need to sleep. This is non-negotiable. The problem, and it is a genuinely significant problem, is the landscape surrounding you. Within a reasonable travel distance of your current location, there are lions. There are leopards, which are arguably more dangerous because they are better at stealth and have a documented preference for sleeping in elevated locations. There are hyenas, which are clever enough to coordinate and persistent enough to be a serious threat to any individual isolated from group protection. There are crocodiles near water. There are African wild dogs that can run down almost anything over distance. There are potentially hostile members of other human groups in the region. And all of these threats are, if anything, more active at night than during the day, because most of the serious predators in this environment are crepuscular or nocturnal, meaning you are about to spend 7 to 9 hours of unavoidable unconsciousness during the period when the things that want to eat you are most energetically engaged. How did your ancestors solve this problem? How did a species that requires extended daily unconsciousness survive in environments containing predators that treat that unconsciousness as opportunity? The answer involves fire, social organization, strategic location selection, and evolutionary modifications to human sleep architecture that are considerably more sophisticated than most people have considered. The fire answer comes first because it is the most dramatically effective predator deterrent available to early humans, and because the timing of controlled fire use by the human lineage is both established and relevant to the sleep question. Archaeological evidence for controlled fire use by human ancestors extends back at least 400,000 years at sites like Khazem Cave in Israel and Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, with some candidates for earlier fire use associated with Homo erectus going back considerably further. By the time anatomically modern Homo sapiens appeared approximately 300,000 years ago, fire management was an established part of the human behavioral repertoire. Not a novelty or an occasional occurrence, but a regular, expected feature of daily and nightly life. Fire does several things simultaneously that are relevant to nighttime safety. The most direct is predator deterrence. The majority of large predators in African environments have a strong aversion to fire, not because they are specifically afraid of flames, but because fire is associated with danger, with heat that can cause injury, and with unpredictability. A lion approaching a sleeping group of humans around a maintained fire is doing risk-benefit analysis, and the risk side of that equation includes potential injury from embers and the general alarm response that a fired-up prey group produces. The benefit of taking one of the sleeping humans must outweigh these costs, and for most predators in most circumstances, it does not. The deterrence effect of fire is not absolute. There are documented cases of lions attacking groups with fire present, and the assumption that a campfire makes you completely safe would be dangerously wrong. But the statistical effect on predator approach probability is substantial. A sleeping group around a maintained fire is dramatically less likely to be attacked than the same group sleeping in open terrain without fire. The fire shifts the risk-benefit calculation for predators in a direction that reduces attack probability significantly, though not to zero. Fire also provides light, and light is itself a deterrent because it removes the darkness that predators exploit for the approach concealment that makes their attacks successful. A predator attempting to approach a lit camp loses the darkness advantage that makes night hunting effective in the first place. The approach becomes visible to any alert members of the group who happen to be awake, and the likelihood of successful approach decreases with visibility. The maintenance of fire through the night required fuel. Someone needed to ensure the fire did not go out, which meant either sufficient fuel loading at bedtime to maintain combustion through the night, or occasional tending by group members who were partially awake. This fire maintenance requirement connects directly to the social and sleep architecture dimensions of the sleep safety question. Social organization is probably the most important single factor in early human sleep survival, and its importance operates through multiple mechanisms simultaneously. The most direct mechanism is collective vigilance. A single individual sleeping alone in a predator-rich environment has no warning system. When sleep takes their consciousness, they are entirely dependent on waking quickly enough to respond to any threat that approaches. A sleeping group of 15 or 20 individuals is a completely different situation. Sleep in social groups is rarely synchronized. Different individuals cycle through lighter and deeper sleep phases phases at different times, and the probability that at least some members of the group are in lighter, more easily aroused sleep at any given moment is substantially higher than for any individual alone. This statistical protection from group sleeping is reinforced by the partial arousal states that characterize lighter sleep phases. Someone in light sleep, in the transitional stages between waking and deep sleep, or in the lighter portions of their sleep cycle, is capable of registering environmental sounds and responding to them without being fully conscious. An unusual sound, a change in the quality of the night's ambient noise, the approach of something large and heavy through vegetation, these can penetrate light sleep and produce arousal before the threat has reached the sleeping group. The individual who stirs at an unusual sound and sits up, oriented toward the source, provides a warning function for the whole group even without consciously intending to. The social group's presence also creates a different acoustic and olfactory environment for approaching predators. A group of humans has a substantial collective smell signature. The accumulated odor of multiple individuals, their fire, their food preparation, their stored materials. This concentrated human scent is a warning signal to predators with sophisticated olfactory systems, a signal that the approaching target is not a solitary individual, but a group of social animals capable of collective defense. Many predators avoid this signature, preferring to target isolated individuals whose group defense capability is absent. The collective defense capability itself matters. Early humans were not individually imposing physical opponents for large predators. An adult human alone is not a serious threat to a lion. A group of 10 or 15 adult humans with fire-hardened spears, throwing stones, and the coordinated group response that social intelligence enables is a different matter entirely. Predators that regularly attack group-defended prey experience injury. An injury in a predator is often fatal because it impairs hunting capability. The evolutionary pressure on predators to avoid prey that fights back collectively is strong, and the human group's capacity for collective defense made sleeping groups a more dangerous target than isolated individuals. Location selection, where ancient humans chose to sleep, is another dimension of the sleep safety problem that receives less attention than fire and social organization, but was equally important in practice. Elevated locations are the most consistently documented sleeping preference across both ancient human behavior and the sleep locations of other primates. Chimpanzees construct sleeping nests in trees every night, platforms of bent branches that provide an elevated, relatively concealed sleeping surface that ground predators cannot easily access. The nest construction behavior of chimpanzees is so consistent and so universal across the species that it appears to be a deeply evolved behavioral response to ground-level predation pressure. Human bipedalism and human body size eventually made regular arboreal sleeping impractical. Adult humans are too heavy for the kind of branch-based nesting that chimpanzees use, and the balance and gripping requirements of sleeping in trees are less compatible with the human body plan than with the more arboreal chimpanzee body. But the preference for elevated defensible positions persisted in the locations early humans selected for sleeping. Cave entrances, not cave interiors which can trap occupants without escape routes, but the areas near cave entrances that provide overhead shelter and reduce the number of approach directions a predator can use, appear repeatedly in the archaeological record as habitation and presumably sleeping locations. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. A cave entrance provides overhead shelter against rain and cold, reduces wind exposure, limits predator approach to a relatively narrow front, and provides a surface above and behind that eliminates the vulnerability of being approached from multiple directions simultaneously. A group of humans sleeping across the entrance of a shallow cave or rock shelter is extremely difficult to approach without waking the group because the approach geometry funnels any attacker into the area where the group's collective response is most effective. Rocky terrain and cliff faces served similar functions. Positions where the back and sides were protected by rock, where approach was limited to a single direction, and where any approaching predator had to cross terrain that would slow its movement and generate noise. The selection of sleeping locations with these properties reflects spatial thinking about predator approach, the same capacity for modeling future scenarios and working backward to present decisions that characterizes human planning more broadly. The temporal selection of sleeping periods also mattered, sleeping during the darkest hours when predator activity peaks, rather than sleeping during twilight periods when visibility for predators is still reasonable but but fire deterrence is less visually salient, would increase safety. Sleeping during the hottest midday hours, when many large predators are themselves resting in shade, and maintaining some activity into the early evening when fire provides better deterrence than pure darkness might also have been adaptive. The flexibility of human sleep timing, compared to the more rigidly fixed sleep patterns of many other species, may itself reflect selection pressure for timing sleep to minimize overlap with peak predator activity. The evolutionary modifications to human sleep architecture that appear to have occurred in response to ground sleeping safety requirements are perhaps the most fascinating dimension of this question, because they suggest that the predation pressure on sleeping humans was strong enough to leave signatures in human sleep biology itself. Compared to other primates, humans sleep in a shorter duration, but with dramatically more time spent in REM sleep as a proportion of total sleep. The average human sleeps approximately 7 hours and spends roughly 25% of the time in REM sleep. Chimpanzees sleep approximately 9 to 10 hours and spend roughly 10% in REM. This human pattern, shorter total sleep with proportionally more REM, has been proposed by sleep researcher Matthew Walker and others as an evolutionary adaptation to ground sleeping in predator-rich environments. The hypothesis works as follows. Ground sleeping in a predator-rich environment creates selection pressure for shorter total sleep duration because less time spent asleep means less time spent in the most vulnerable state. But shorter total sleep must maintain the essential neural functions that sleep serves. And the most cognitively valuable functions, including the memory consolidation and emotional processing associated with REM sleep, must be preserved even as total sleep duration shortens. The solution under this hypothesis was to compress total sleep duration while maintaining or increasing the proportion of REM sleep, getting more cognitive benefit per hour of sleep by concentrating the most valuable sleep stage. The result is a human sleep architecture that is uniquely efficient among primates, accomplishing the cognitive functions of longer sleep in a shorter duration, while reducing total sleep vulnerability to predators. If this hypothesis is correct, human REM sleep efficiency is literally a product of millions of years of being eaten while asleep. Or, more precisely, a product of selection pressure favoring individuals who managed to not be eaten while asleep by sleeping shorter but smarter. The Sentinel behavior documented in various traditional human communities and in non-human primate groups represents another social sleep safety mechanism worth examining in detail. Many social primates show partial sleep, a pattern in which some members of a group maintain partial vigilance while others sleep more deeply, with the vigilant individuals positioned to detect and respond to threats before they reach the sleeping members. This is not the same as taking formal sleep watches. It is a more distributed, probabilistic system in which the natural variation in sleep depth across a group creates an effective, if informal, early warning network. In various traditional human societies, more explicit sentinel arrangements have been documented. Individuals or pairs who maintain waking watch during portions of the night while others sleep, rotating through the night to distribute the burden. The San people of southern Africa and various other traditionally living groups maintain awareness of night sounds and environmental conditions in ways that function as collective night watch without the formal institutional structure that military night watch implies. The communication networks that extend the effective sentinel range are also relevant. Dogs, domesticated from wolves approximately 15,000 to 40,000 years ago, almost certainly served early as a sentinel extension long before their utility as hunters and herders was developed. Dogs have superior night vision compared to humans, superior olfactory detection of approaching animals, and a strong territorial alarm response. A dog sleeping near a human encampment that detects an approaching large predator and responds with alarm barking provides the human group with a detection system extending far beyond what human senses alone can monitor. The timing of dog domestication coincides roughly with the Upper Paleolithic period when human behavioral complexity was at its peak, and the sentinel function of dogs in communities that kept them may have been among the first reciprocal benefits of the human-dog relationship. The fire maintenance question connects directly to the sleep architecture question in an interesting way that illuminates how social sleep safety worked in practice across a night. Maintaining a fire through a full night requires either fuel management, loading enough fuel at bedtime to sustain combustion for several hours, or periodic tending. For a fire providing both warmth and predator deterrence, adequate fuel loading at bedtime was probably the primary strategy, supplemented by the natural waking that occurs for many people during the night, as part of the bimodal sleep pattern that some sleep researchers believe is the natural human sleep rhythm. The bimodal or segmented sleep hypothesis, proposed by historian Roger E. Kirch based on historical sources from pre-industrial pre-industrial European society, suggests that before artificial lighting extended the day, people commonly slept in two distinct periods separated by an hour or more of quiet waking in the middle of the night. This wakeful period between sleep segments was used for prayer, reflection, conversation, and various activities before returning to sleep for the second period until morning. If this bimodal sleep pattern is genuinely natural to human sleep architecture, and there is both historical evidence and some physiological support for it, then the middle of night waking period would have provided a natural opportunity for fire tending, for checking the perimeter of the camp for a period of collective low-level vigilance before returning to sleep. A group in which different individuals woke naturally at different points during the midnight interval would provide irregular but collectively effective night monitoring without anyone needing to deliberately sacrifice sleep for guard duty. This natural sleep fragmentation distributed the night watch function across the group without the imposition of formal rotations. The group's natural sleep patterns collectively produced the irregular monitoring that kept the fire adequate and maintained some awareness of the camp's surroundings through the darkest hours. The specific predation threat that probably drove the strongest selection pressure on human sleep safety behavior was the leopard, not the lion, which, despite its cultural prominence as the apex predator of the African savanna, is actually less dangerous to sleeping humans than the leopard in several important ways. Lions are social animals that hunt in coordinated groups, which makes them formidable against large prey, but also means their hunting behavior is relatively observable and audible. Lions also tend to be more active in open terrain and are less effective climbers than leopards. Their presence can be detected at distance through the alarm calls of other species and through their own vocalizations. Leopards are solitary, silent, extraordinarily skilled at concealed approach, and accomplished climbers, the combination that makes them the most dangerous predator for sleeping humans in an African forest or woodland environment. Leopards regularly take prey from sleeping locations, including prey in elevated positions that other predators cannot access. They can carry prey heavier than themselves into trees, removing the carcass from the reach of larger scavengers and competitors. The particular behavioral characteristics of leopard predation, the silent approach, the ambush from elevation, the targeting of isolated or peripheral individuals, created selection pressure for sleeping behaviors that specifically countered these tactics. Sleeping in tight groups rather than spread out reduces the probability that any individual is peripheral enough to be targeted without alerting the group. Maintaining fire reduces the concealment that the leopard's approach requires. Selecting sleeping locations with overhead shelter or cliff backing reduces the angle of approach available to an elevated predator. The fact that modern humans still show a significant startle response to sudden movement and sound during sleep, a startle response that is substantially stronger than warranted by modern environmental threats, may reflect the evolutionary legacy of the leopard problem. The hair-trigger alertness to threat during sleep that many people experience as intrusive or inconvenient is a biological legacy of an era when the consequences of not waking fast enough were immediate and fatal. The cognitive dimension of sleep safety, the ability to maintain awareness of risk even during sleep, connects to a broader set of human cognitive capabilities that may have co-evolved with the demands of ground sleeping in dangerous environments. Humans show a remarkable capacity for selective attention during sleep, the ability to wake in response to their name being called, or to sounds that are personally relevant, while sleeping through sounds of equal or greater volume that are not personally relevant. A parent sleeping through street noise but waking immediately to the sound of their child's cry is demonstrating this selective attention. The evolutionary origin of this capability may lie in the need to filter environmental sounds during sleep, to maintain some monitoring of the acoustic environment, and respond to signals indicating threat while ignoring signals that do not require response. This selective acoustic monitoring during sleep requires a brain that remains partly active during sleep, not in the full sense of waking consciousness, but in the sense of maintaining continuous low-level auditory processing and applying significance filters to incoming signals. The human brain during sleep is doing this continuously, and its success at detecting personally relevant signals while ignoring irrelevant ones is remarkable given the apparent unconsciousness of the sleeping state. The social significance of sounds, voices, names, the alarm calls of familiar companions is prioritized in this sleep monitoring in ways that reflect the social nature of human sleep safety. The most important signals during ancient sleep were social signals: the alarm call of a companion, the sudden movement of a nearby group member, the sounds of a companion in distress. The human brain's prioritization of socially significant sounds during sleep monitoring is exactly the priority structure that ground sleeping in social groups in predator-rich environments would produce through selection. The full picture of how ancient humans slept without being eaten is a picture of multiple overlapping defensive systems, functioning simultaneously. Fire-deterring predator approach, social grouping providing collective vigilance and defense capability, location selection limiting approach geometry, sleep architecture reducing vulnerability time while maintaining cognitive function, and the distributed night monitoring provided by natural sleep variation and bimodal sleep patterns. No single one of these systems was sufficient on its own. Fire without social group was insufficient. A solitary human maintaining a fire was still more vulnerable than a group. Social group without fire or location selection left the group more exposed than optimal. The systems worked together, each addressing different aspects of the predation problem, and collectively producing a level of safety that made ground sleeping viable for a species that had descended from arboreal ancestors with tree-based sleeping habits. The remarkable thing, reflecting on this system from the comfort of a bedroom with a locked door and no apex predators within hundreds of kilometers, is how much cognitive and social infrastructure ancient humans mobilized in service of something as apparently passive as sleeping. The nightly negotiation with the predator-rich night required fire management, location intelligence, social coordination, sleep timing judgment, and the evolved sleep biology shaped by millions of years of exactly this challenge. The Homo sapiens who successfully navigated this challenge every night for hundreds of thousands of years passed those capabilities: the sleep architecture, the selective auditory monitoring, the social sleep coordination, the instinctive fire maintenance, to the descendants now sleeping in electrically lit, climate-controlled rooms who occasionally still wake at 3 a.m. from a sound that turns out to be the neighbor's cat. The threat that caused that waking reflex to evolve is long gone, at least in the immediate environment, but the reflex is still there, maintained by the same biology that kept those ancient sleepers alive long enough to have descendants at all. Sleep, it turns out, was never passive. It was always, from the very beginning, a form of work.